welcome to the Jayda and Stitches show. Somehow it's already October, which means it's time for the 10th square in our Granny's Magical Cupboard calendar blanket project. And since the wind has picked up and the leaves have started to really fly about, we thought this was the perfect month to introduce you to the Whirling Granny. This granny square is very similar to the solid double crochet granny. It's got a nice sort of warmth in it, it's stitch in every single stitch, pretty easy to do. But there's one exception. In order to get that spinning, whirling look, we're going to add in leaning cable stitches. Not too many, just 4 per row, and they all come just before the chain 2 corner. If you're new to cable stitches, then this is a really nice introduction to them because this kind of cabling is really easy to see. We always anchor the cable stitch in the stitch just after the chain 2 corner, so the corner, that little stitch marker really comes in handy. The corner space is your big indicator that a cable stitch is coming up. If you make it all in one color or 2 colors like this one, you get a nice textured feel. That spinning effect isn't necessarily as obvious, but you do get a really nifty texture from all of those cable stitches. But if you really want them to pop, then I recommend changing colors frequently, like I did with this one. This is the one I'm going to show you today. Now, whether you do it all in one color or a whole bunch of different colors, any way you stitch it up, it's a really nifty square. And it's got a whirling effect, which is kind of fun. And it's a fun way to introduce yourself to cables if you've never done them before. So, without further ado, let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch up a whirling granny square together. In order to crochet our whirling granny square, I'm using a size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn. I'm doing 3 colors today. In total, you're going to want around 40 to 45 yards of yarn, and that will break down more or less balanced depending on how many colors you want. So 15 to 20 yards if you're using 3 colors, 20 to 25 yards if you're using 2 colors, etc. You're going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. Stitch markers are very helpful to keep track of the corner spaces in this pattern, and I'm using a 5.5mm hook, also known as an eye or a 9. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. The whirling granny square begins like most of the squares in this series. We're going to start with a slip knot on our hook, chain 5, and join with a slip stitch to the first chain to make a ring. We're going to work row 1 into this ring. We're going to chain 3 to begin. The chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and the chain 3 at the beginning of every row of this granny square counts as a double crochet. 2 more double crochet into the ring, and that's side number 1 completed. Chain 2 for the corner space. All corner spaces in this pattern are chain 2s. 3 more double crochet into the ring, and chain 2 for a corner. You're going to work 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet, chain 2 into that ring, and I'll catch up with you at the end of row 1. At the end of row 1, you'll have 4 sides, each of them with 3 double crochets along it, and 4 chain 2 corner spaces. You're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. That's the stitch you began the row with, and that is row 1 complete. If you want to change colors for each row like me, you're going to fasten off right where you are and join a new color in the same place. If you're not changing colors, just stay put. We're all going to start from the same place together. I will be changing colors for each row of this square. So to change colors, I'm just going to fasten off right where I joined the row. You can weave in your tails later if you like. I am now switching to blue. If you're not changing colors, just relax, stay put. We're all starting in the same place. Begin your new color with a slip knot on your hook. Join with a slip stitch in the top of the chain 3, the same place you just fastened off. So we're all going to start and stop in the same place. And it's just like you never changed colors at all. We are all in the top of the chain 3 where we joined row 1. Row 2, here we go. We're going to chain 3. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet. This pattern is very much like the solid double crochet granny square. So you're going to look for every single stitch all the way around and make sure that you double crochet into the top of each stitch, with one little exception. The stitch before the chain 2 corner always gets skipped. So we're still technically putting a stitch in this area, but we're not anchoring it in the top right here. This is where you would normally work the stitch, the top of that stitch right there, just before the chain 2 corner, but we're going to skip working into that, and instead of working into the top of this stitch, we're going to skip the stitch, we're going to skip the chain 2 corner, and we're going to look for the post of the next stitch. So after your chain 2 corner, this stitch right here, you're looking for the post. The post of the stitch is the vertical stem of the stitch that sits beneath the horizontal loops up here. And we're going to double crochet around the post of this stitch. It is not tricky at all. You just slip your hook underneath that entire post, pick up a loop around it, and because it's a bit of a stretch, you're going to pick up a loop and make it a little bit taller than you normally would. You want it to be roughly the same height as your other stitches, and then just double crochet as normal. It's going to be a little long, and that's okay. So we chained 3 to begin, double crocheted into the next stitch, but because the next stitch was the stitch just before the chain 2 corner, we skipped anchoring the stitch in the top of it, and instead anchored that 3rd stitch around the post of the stitch past the chain 2 corner. And here's where the nifty little magic happens. Just pull that little extended, stretched double crochet out of the way. You're looking for the chain 2 corner space that you just skipped, and now you're going to do a regular solid double crochet granny square corner into that chain 2 space. All chain 2 spaces in this pattern get the same. You work 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochet all into the same space. So 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in the corner space. That's all corner spaces in this pattern, no exception. And now we've got something that looks like this. All right, we're going to continue now. You've got 3 stitches along what was side 1 of the previous row. Whenever you finish with your crocheting in a corner space, pull back a little bit on that set of stitches you made so that you can see the top of the stitch that you crocheted around the post of. So this stitch right after the chain 2 corner space will always have a double crochet anchored around the middle of it. But we also want to crochet into the top of this stitch. So you're going to double crochet into the top of that stitch, just like you normally would in a solid double crochet granny square. Double crochet into the next stitch. And when you get up to the stitch that sits right before the chain 2 space, you're going to skip working into the top of that stitch. You're going to skip over the chain 2 space, find the stitch next to it. So skip a stitch, skip the chain 2 space, find the post of the next stitch, and double crochet around it. Take your time if you have to. Post stitches can be a little funny. You're pulling up on that loop a little bit more. You're not crocheting tightly because you don't want to make your post stitches tight. You don't want to sort of have funny little cinches along the edge of your granny square. Then you go back to that chain 2 space that you just skipped. You just sort of pull that post stitch out of the way, find the chain 2 space that you just skipped, and then work a normal corner into it. 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. Now our stitch count is going to be just the same as the row 2 stitch count from any of the other squares in this series. We're adding 4 stitches per side each row. So if we went from 3 stitches in row 1 along each side, we're going to 7 stitches in row 2 along each side. So you still have 7 stitches. It's just that instead of anchoring the stitch just before the chain 2 space in the top of a stitch, you're skipping it, you're anchoring it on a post around the corner, and then going back and finishing the row. 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in the corner, pull back. This stitch has a post wrapped around it. It's fine. You're still using the top of it. So the stitch right after the chain 2 space sort of works double duty. When you get up to the chain 2, the stitch just before the chain 2 corner space, so this one right here, you, instead of working into it, you're skipping the space, you're going to anchor that stitch instead around the post of the next stitch. And that creates this lovely long angling double crochet around the post stitch. Then you back up to the chain 2 space that you just skipped and work the regular little corner into it. 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. Pull back. You want to not miss that first stitch. You know that's the stitch you want to work into because the long post stitch from the previous side is wrapped around the middle of it, so you also want to work into the top of that stitch. It's doing double duty, this pattern. Work into the top of each stitch up to the stitch just before the chain 2 space. And instead of double crocheting into the top of it, nope, we're going to skip it. We're going to skip the chain 2 space and we're going to wrap ourselves around the post of the stitch right after the chain 2 space. In this case, it's the chain 3. It's okay. Still functions like a double crochet. Pull up on that loop. Nice, easy-going post stitch. It's got a lovely lean to it. And then before you're done, back up to that chain 2 space and work the regular little pattern of 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochet. And that finds us right back at the beginning. There's the chain 3 that began the row, so we're going to slip stitch to join in the top of that chain 3. Each side will have 7 stitches along it. You'll have 4 chain 2 corners. It's always nice to sort of lay it down and give it a little stretch. And don't worry if things look a little wonky at first. The first 2 rows always kind of look like that when you're establishing a new pattern for yourself. And here is where you might want to start using your stitch markers. So we want to pay attention to the chain 2 corner spaces because as we get up to them, we want to make sure we're looking for the stitch just before the chain 2 corner space, so the stitch right before the space, because we are not working into the top of that, we are skipping over and working into the post or around the post of the stitch after the chain 2 space. And it's the same for every single row going forward in this pattern. Once again, if you're changing colors, you just fasten off right where you are. So right at the top of that chain 3 that you joined your yarn in, fasten off. If you're not changing colors, just stay put. Grab your new color. I'm back to white now. Put a slip knot on your hook. Join with a slip stitch in the same place that you joined your yarn, which is the top of that chain 3. Again, if you're not changing colors, you're just sort of hanging out. All right, so we're all back now in the same place. You've changed colors or not, either way, we're all sitting at the same place. It's the top of that chain 3 where we joined the previous row. Every row begins with a chain 3. So I'm going to get my little tails out of the way here. There we go. Chain 3. Chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and we're going to double crochet in every single stitch up to the stitch just before the chain 2 corner. So much like a regular solid double crochet granny square, you're double crocheting in the top of every single stitch all the way around. But in this case, you've got one little exception, and that is the double crochet just before the chain 2 space. So when you get up to it, so here's my stitch marker. That's the stitch right before the chain 2 space. I am skipping it. I'm skipping the space, and I'm going to double crochet instead around the post of the next stitch. So just to put it in different terms, the reason we're not losing a stitch is we're just because we're not anchoring the stitch here doesn't mean we're not creating the stitch. So the stitch now that sits just before the chain 2 space, we are not anchoring it here, we are just anchoring it over here, but we're still making it. So if you were to ignore that you'd still see that you have still put in an extra stitch there. It's just that it's anchored somewhere else. And now we back up and we work 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochet into the skipped corner space. So just because you're skipping over that corner space doesn't mean that you're using it. So you anchor a double crochet around the post of the stitch after the space, and then you back up and you work the regular 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into the corner space right over here. And that way you continue with that stitch count. So now you've added 2 new stitches to that row, just like you normally would, but you just have this funky little kind of cable going. I like to put my stitch marker back in place in that chain 2 corner just so I don't lose track. And now it's very simple. You pull back, make sure you don't miss the top of that stitch. Just because there's a post wrapped around, or a stitch wrapped around the post of it, doesn't mean that you're not using it. This stitch pulls double duty. So you're double crocheting now into every single stitch along the side. Nice and easy. Absolutely nothing out of the ordinary here. There's the long cable stitch from the previous row. Doesn't matter, you're still crocheting into the top of it just like it's a regular stitch. Crochet in every single stitch along each side all the way up to the stitch just before the chain 2 corner. So the corner has a big stitch marker on it. I know it's coming. I'm looking for that stitch. I'm going to skip it. I want to make sure that I do not crochet into the top of it. I skip it. I skip the chain 2 corner. I wrap my hook underneath the next stitch instead. Double crochet around the post of that other stitch. And then I kind of pull it out of the way. I find the chain 2 corner that I skipped, and into that space I work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. All right, I'm going to put my stitch marker back in there, and that's a full side completed. So 3 stitches in row 1 per side, 7 stitches in row 2 per side, 11 stitches in row 3 per side. So you'll have 11 stitches just like a regular solid double crochet granny square. It's just that that stitch towards the end of the row is a sort of a sideways or a diagonal cable, and that's how we're going to get that really fun whirling granny square effect. It's the same pattern over and over and over again. You back up, 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into that corner space. Make sure you don't skip the first stitch on the way out. Double crochet in every single stitch along the side, no exceptions. And then you'll get to the stitch just before the chain 2 corner. If you've got a stitch marker on the corner space like I do, it kind of helps you know it's coming, so you can maybe slow down. Find the stitch just before the corner. That's the top of it. You skip it, skip the corner space, slip your hook underneath the post. So you're just slipping it underneath the post, double crochet. Nice and easy with that long cable. You don't want to make it tight. And then back up and work your regular corner as if nothing happened into that chain 2 corner space. 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. Once I finish a corner, I like to sort of pause, grab my stitch marker, put it back in place. If I'm unsure, I'll count, make sure there's 11 stitches all the way across that side, and then continue. Double crochet in every single stitch. Don't miss the one that's just after the chain 2 corner. Every single stitch except that one. Every row finishes are the same way. You're going to work your last corner, so that's the stitch before the chain 2 space. I skip it, I skip the space, double crochet instead around the post of the next stitch, the stitch just after the corner space. Back up, do the last corner, which is 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, pause, kind of give everything a little tug, put my stitch marker back in place, and then that puts me back on the side that I began with. So there's my chain 3. I want to make sure I don't miss any of the stitches leading up to it. So I double crochet in each of the remaining stitches along that row. In this case for row 3, there's only 2 stitches remaining. But remember, your chain 3 counts. So if you're confused, at the end of this row, each side should have 11 stitches. So count up your stitches, and make sure that the last stitch you do is number 11, and then join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. Lay it down, pull out your corners. You can give all of your stitches a little bit of a tug around that cable just to kind of even them out. I find that helps. If you're changing colors, go ahead, snip your yarn, fasten off, join your yarn with a slip stitch in the same place that you just fastened off. If you're not changing colors, just stay put. We're heading into row 4. I've changed colors again. You don't have to, but if you do change colors at any time in any row, you just fasten off where you join the row, join your color with a slip stitch in the same place. Every row begins the same with a chain 3. Every row we are double crocheting into each stitch all the way up to the stitch just before the chain 2 space. When you get there, you are going to start a double crochet, but you're not anchoring it in that final stitch. You are skipping over the chain 2 space, and instead you're anchoring it around the post of the stitch just after the corner. So here I am, up to the corner. There's the stitch before the space. I'm going to take my little stitch marker out. I'm going to start a double crochet, not here, but here, around the post of the next stitch, the one just after the corner. Give that a bit of a hike when you're making those loops, just to make sure that your cable stitch is not pulling on any of your other stitches or squishing your square. Then don't forget to back up and work into that corner space, the usual 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochet. Double crochet in every single stitch up to the stitch just before the next corner. Skip it. Skip the chain 2 corner. Double crochet instead around the post of the stitch just after. So that would be this guy here. Double crochet around the post of that stitch. Back up. Do the corner. 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, and then double crochet in every single stitch. Skip this one. Double crochet around the post of the next one, and so on. You're going to do that same pattern over and over and over again. Remember, when you are leaving a corner, pull back on those stitches. Don't forget to double crochet into the top of the stitch right next to the corner. Just because there's a double crochet wrapped around the post of it doesn't mean you don't work into the top of it. That second stitch, or that stitch after the corner, pulls double duty, so don't forget that. We're on row 4. So row 4 will have 15 double crochet along each side, and the pattern is the same from here on out. I'm going to catch up with you at the end of the row. I'll get us through that last corner together, and then we'll be on to row 5. I'm just coming up to the last corner of the row, and it's always the same thing. As you near the last corner of any row in this particular pattern, like any corner, you skip the stitch just before the corner, you skip the corner, you double crochet instead around the post of the next stitch. That's the stitch after the corner. Now that cable, that still counts as a stitch on this side. It's just that we're anchoring it elsewhere. Back up, don't forget the corner, 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, and the only part of this pattern which I think you could consider quote-unquote tricky would just be making sure that when you crochet into each of the remaining stitches back to the chain 3, you don't accidentally add or miss a stitch. Each side of row 4 should have 15 stitches in it. So you're double crocheting into each stitch. Don't be confused by the little slip stitch that is what you joined your last row with. That's what we call the false stitch. Ignore that. You want to make sure you get the top of every actual stitch, and if you're confused, just stop, count up all the stitches on that side. There should be 15 at the end of row 4. Join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. I'll put my stitch marker back in. There should be 15 stitches along each side. And every corner should have a leaning cable stitch along it, just like the previous rows. If you're changing colors, fasten off, join your new color with a slip stitch in the exact same place. That's the top of the chain 3 from this row here. Chain 3 to begin the new row, and we begin the same pattern all over again. You're double crocheting in every single stitch up to the stitch just before the corner. You skip the stitch, skip the corner, double crochet instead around the post of the next stitch. Back up, do the corner, 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. Then don't miss the top of that stitch. That stitch does double duty, and you're going to double crochet in every single stitch except the last stitch of the side just before the corner. So you're always skipping that last stitch just before the corner along each side. Instead, you're anchoring that stitch around the post of the stitch just after the corner. Don't forget to back up and do your corners. I'm going to let you start row 5 on your own. I'll catch up with you towards the end of it. I'm nearing the end of row 5. I'm about to do my last corner, so I thought I'd catch up with you. In row 5, each side has 19 stitches along it. So if you're keeping track, and you should be, make sure you've got 19 stitches across each side, and that includes that cable. So I'm at my last corner. That's the stitch before the corner. I'm skipping it. Crochet around the post of the next stitch. That one would be after the corner. Back up, do the corner. 2 double crochet, chain 2, and now 2 double crochet. That completes the corner. So I'm going to put my stitch marker back in. So there's my last cable, and then I back up and do the corner, and now I've got the remaining stitches. Make sure I don't miss that one as I leave the corner, and in case I get lost or I'm not sure what I'm looking at when I get up to that chain 3 that began the row, I just pause, I put it down, and before I join the row, I count. I want to make sure there are 19 stitches along each side at the end of row 5. So if I'm unsure, I lay it down. Here are my 2 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The chain 3 counts. That's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's my cable. 18, 19. That's 19 stitches from corner to corner. Remember, we don't count the chains in the corner because they're kind of consistent throughout. We always have chain 2 corner spaces. Join with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. I like to lay it down, pause, pull out my corners, do a little minor hand blocking as I go. This just helps keep things looking neat and tidy as I work. There's one more row, row 6 to do. It's the exact same pattern. If you're changing colors, fasten off, join your new color with a slip stitch in the top of that chain 3. If you're not, that's fine. We all just chain 3, double crochet into every single stitch up to the stitch before the corner. Double crochet around the post of the following stitch, back up, do your corner, 2 double crochet, 2 chains, 2 double crochet in every single stitch along the next side, skip the last stitch before the corner, and so on. Once again, I'm going to let you do all of row 6 by yourself. I'll catch up with you as we're rounding the last corner, and we'll talk stitch counts. I am coming up on the last corner of row 6, my final row. So just like every corner before that, I'm going to take my stitch marker out of the corner, skip the last stitch before the corner, skip the corner, double crochet around the post, nice easy going cable stitch, pull it up a little bit higher just so that it doesn't pull down on my other stitches, back up, finish the corner, 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochet. Now every side in row 6 should have 23 stitches in it between your corner spaces. So once again, you're going to finish off your last row by double crocheting in every remaining stitch. If for some reason you are a little lost or you're not sure if you've got the right number of stitches, Just pause, put down your square, count up those stitches across that last side, make sure there are 23 of them. And that includes the chain 3 that began the row. I am almost done. I really like the whirly effect of this particular square. And there we go. Last stitch. Joining with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. And there we go. Slip stitch to join. Now, of course, you can continue to make this square as many rows as you want. All you want to do is chain 3 to begin the row. You, of course, can also start with a standing double crochet if you're comfortable with that. Change colors as often or as little as you want, and the pattern remains the same. You're always skipping the last stitch before the chain 2 space, skipping the space, and making a cable, a double crochet around the post of the following stitch. Back up, do your corner, and then don't miss the top of that stitch on your way down the next side. End of row 6, each of your sides should have 23 stitches in it. All that's left now is to fasten off. Take out your stitch markers, weave in your tails, and maybe do a little light blocking. With a lot of granny squares where you're constantly kind of working in the same direction instead of changing directions with each row, you'll often get sort of a little bit of a lean to it, but as this is the whirling granny, it kind of works. Weave in your tails on the back of your square, and you're all done. The October granny square. And there you go, the whirling granny. It's got the same coverage, the same simplicity even as the solid double crochet granny square, but those leaning cables just give it a little bit of textured interest. Just a little bit of quirkiness, and we like quirky. We hope you enjoyed stitching up this month's square along with us, and if you'd like to pick up a copy of the written pattern, you can pop into our Etsy shop, the link is in the description box down below, and you'll find the pattern there. And a gigantic thank you to everybody who has helped support our show by being a member, picking up a pattern, or offering a super thanks or a super chat when we're live streaming. We really appreciate it. That's it for this week. We will see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, stay whirly, and we'll see you soon. Bye guys!
Hi everybody, Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.